I was asked to welcome you here. This was the school basement. Now it is a school for autistic adults. We rent out the second floor, and there's a school for autistic adults on the second floor. And then 2 years before we started the church, we restored this hall. This was the school cafeteria when it was filled with the Italian kids. And the Italian kids, they opened up the school in 1911. And they invited the Irish nuns, the Irish Franciscans, to teach in an Italian school because they wanted their kids to learn good English. And who else do you go to but Irish nuns to teach people good English? So this is it. Now, before they built the church, they had this building, and you can see on the walls there, and on the cement beams, you can see the eye bars. See them? That's where the floor originally was, down that low. Because up until they built the church, this was the basement of the school and also the basement of the church, because the church was upstairs. The way they did it was they built schools first to educate their children. They included in the church, rather in the school, the church. So that was on the second floor, and the third floor was the school. And we know that Mother Cabrini came to this church upstairs when it was a church. Because Mother Cabrini was building her hospital across the street to service the Italian immigrants. And the hospital is still there. It's a condo building. I happen to live in one of the apartments. But Mother Cabrini was building this in 1911, the same time they were opening this place up, and went to church in the old church above us. She dies in 1917. And so this place, then after the church was built in 1925, this place got remodeled. They lifted up the floors, they made this the formal refectory for the kids, and they had 2 floors of schools by then. This school closed in 1990, the parish closed in 1990, and it was going to be sold for condo land and condo buildings. The Italian community, inspired by Mother Cabrini, went up in arms against the cardinal, who at the time was Italian, Cardinal Bernardino. And so they about 1990, after they shut this down and were going to sell it, they did this wonderful movement called Pompeii on the Move. And by 1994, it took them 4 years to convince the cardinal that this place should not be destroyed, because the immigrants built this with their hard-earned money here in the United States. They built it as a tribute to faith and the Italian culture and Italian faith. And so they saved it. They didn't know what to do with it, so they opened the canon law book. They put one like this on the page. They said, let it become a shrine. They had no idea what a shrine was, because really, only God makes a shrine. I know there's another shrine that these young priests and brothers do on the south side, the shrine of Christ, the sovereign high priest. But again, we made this up, so did they, because a shrine is where God does something. Like the shrine at Gemma Galgani's place. There was a woman who died there. God does something. Like at Lourdes, Mary appears. Or the shrines in the Holy Land where Jesus died. This wasn't, because when the people from Pompeii came over to make us the sister shrine, they says, Madonna, they said, how are you a shrine? Only God makes shrines. Only God. But we're hoping for a miracle. Still here. And maybe something will happen. Because I think the real miracle was that the Italian community in Chicago got together. And that's a miracle. The Italian community came together in the name of Mary, Our Lady of Pompeii, and they restored this, they restored the church, and I think that's a gift that God is doing something. So welcome to this little chiesetta, we say, little church. and welcome to this hall. We hope that the community of St. Gemma Galgani will feel most welcome here. And I want to thank you for joining Marco and the community to be with us. And now I'm going to hand it over to Father Davide, who comes to us all the way from Lucca, but originally from the Bronx. Father Davide.
Thank you, Father, for your very kind words. Marco, before I kind of give you the appendix to the presentation we had in the church, Marco asked me to share some photos with you, just because, as you might not know, the proceeds from the event today will go to help some of the work that is undertaken by a community of sisters called the Sister Missionaries of St. Gemma Galgani. If you remember, during the talk I spoke about the young Eufemia Giannini, who was one of the two who transcribed her ecstasies. Right? Eufemia Giannini after Gemma's death, decided to enter into the Passionist monastery that was founded very, very briefly. We wasn't there at the time when Gemma was alive, and briefly after her death it was founded. And she had entered into these Passionist sisters and was there as a sister for over 30 years. Unfortunately, she had to leave for health reasons, and after she left, she decided to found a community of sisters whose mission was not to be so much behind the grill, let's say, the gates of a pontifical closed monastery, but rather to go into the world and speak about Gemma and her spirituality, and to take care of the places where she lived. And so the proceeds will go to the work that's being done on the Casa Natale, which is the house where Gemma was born. It was the first house, one of the big houses that the Galgani family owned. So these are some of the photos you can see on the roof that they're doing. I can tell you, these photos come from the Mother Superior of the community. I myself have very close ties because they also take care of the church where we have Mass. So during the week, it's these sisters who open and close and clean, and we just show up on the weekend and everything as well. So I talk with them quite a bit, and so they're trying to, as you can see, it wasn't in a great state. They had to buy the building, get permissions. In Italy, everything is very complicated, especially in terms of construction, because these are historic sites, so you need to get tons and tons of permissions from all kinds of legal entities. So it kind of is a bureaucratic nightmare. But you can see it was really in need. The building was in terrible shape, and they're still doing work, even to this day, to try to get it up to snuff. Excuse me. So anyway, I wanted to just share with you that the proceeds do go for a very good work, and that is actually touches Gemma directly. So thank you very much for your generosity in that. In the meantime, I wanted to share voila. Here we go. Okay, so normally I would have these images concurrent with the presentation that I gave in the church. I'll just spend a couple minutes and then we'll be off with dessert. So this is from the bronze, we'd say, kind of sarcophagus that they built when they opened up and they consecrated the shrine of St. Gemma Galgani, where her body is, and which is outside the walls of Lucca. And just to give you an idea of where it is, so it's there, okay? Just to be clear, right there, okay? Some people don't, I don't know, some people might not have heard, right? Pluto's gone, okay? All right, Europe, okay? Geography is important. Today we know it a little bit less than our ancestors, I think, right? So Europe in there. Italy, all right, it's a little more clear because now we're not maybe going as well, right? Where Tuscany is, so that's Tuscany on the Italian peninsula, right? And if you can see, there's a little city of Lucca right there. For example, Padre Pio is from around here, right? And that's Lucca from the air. It is one of the most beautiful cities in all of Italy, and it's one of the few cities left that is still walled to this day. All around it, there's some of the beautiful shots of Lucca, some of the towers, which are left from the Middle Ages. Lucca has been, as a city, has been in existence since before Christ. The first written mention of Lucca is in the Second Punic Wars. So, we're talking 2 or 3 centuries before Jesus Christ. That was already there as a Roman settlement. And over 2,000 years, it's grown into the beautiful city that it is today. This, as you see, is Gemma herself. Now, if someone is clever, they might ask the question, if she's so humble, why do we have a photo? The only reason we have a photo is because she was commanded to, by holy obedience by her spiritual father, that you will take a photo. Right? And that's the only reason we have 3 or 4 photos of her. So, by the way, I have holy cards in Italian, but if anybody wants to take some images and share them, we're more than happy to. If I miss someone. So these are her parents. This is Enrico Galgani. This is her father. And this is Aurelia Landi, her mother. Her mother, as you remember, died of tuberculosis. She was only 39, and she had 8 kids. So I'm older than her, just to give you an idea, at the moment she died. So it was a very brutal time in history for infectious diseases. This is the Casa Natale. This is the house that they're doing work on, where Gemma was born. Enrico Galgani, her father, was a pharmacist, and so which is why he was kind of somewhat wealthy, at least until the end of his life. And he had his pharmacy here, and the family lived in the rest of the house. This is Gemma as a child. A little picture was taken of her before First Communion, so I think she was 5 in this photo, 4 or 5. So this is the church of San Michele in Foro. This is where she received confirmation. This church is built on the spot where the Roman temple was. As you know, Italians, right, we don't like wasting rocks. Right? So say, hey, you know what? Let's throw some stuff on it. We'll call it an exorcist and then we got it in the church, right? So that's how we do it, right? This church in this current form is from the 11th century. Okay. Often, as Americans, I had to go to Europe to understand what old means. This is the inside of the church. It's a crucifix from the 13th century. One of the many saints you have under the altar. San Davino, who was an Armenian saint, a pilgrim, who died in 1084, if I'm not mistaken. And he's underneath the main altar there. He's one of the favorites of Lucca, their saint. So that's where Gemma was confirmed. This is, I neglected to mention during the talk, this is the Basilica of San Frediano. And San Frediano is probably the most famous church aside from the cathedral in Lucca. You have this beautiful mosaic from the end of the 1300s, which is on the entrance to the church on the wall. And in this church is where Gemma did her first communion, because at the time, to understand the Catholicity that was present at the time, it's often we can have a sort of a characteristic idea, but it's good to have concrete figures. Lucca is a very small city. If you walk at a decent pace from north-south, maybe 20 minutes, east-west, 25 before you hit the walls. Okay? There were 12 parishes in that zone, okay, for centuries, for over 1,000 years actually. And San Frediano was one of the parishes. It's called San Frediano. For those of you, I don't know if anyone has been to Lucca with me, who's done a guided tour. You went on your own. Okay, good. Abu Raymond has been with me to Lucca. San Frediano is the most famous bishop of Lucca. He was a saint from the 6th century. He's under the main altar. So the church is named after him. But she actually received, in this church there's 8 saints, just to let you know. So when I talk about the city of saints, it really is. So she received communion in this chapel, in the chapel of Saint Zita. So if you've heard of maybe the Empress Zita, right? She's named after the saint, right? And because their family had a villa in the top around Lucca. And Saint Zita is incorrupt. She is from the 1200s. She is almost exactly contemporaneous with Saint Thomas Aquinas. So 26 to 1274, if I'm not mistaken. And she is the patron saint of domestic servants. She was a maiden. She was a virgin. She never got married, and she was served as a servant in the house of a wealthy family, which still exists to this day, furthermore. And she, there's a bunch of miracles associated with her, but she's often famous throughout the world. We have a cute word, which is perhaps a little bit cheeky, in Italian, which is zitella, which is if a woman doesn't get married, even after a certain age, she's a zitella, which is like saying an old maid, right? Which is a cuter way of saying it, right? In Tuscany. But it comes from her, right? So, this is Monsignor Volpi. So this is Gemma's confessor. So she becomes our confessor during the retreat of her first communion. Right? So this is him, the auxiliary bishop of Lucca, a holy man, and eventually became the bishop of Arezzo, and asked to be buried, which he is, in the sanctuary where she was buried. So his coffin is right next to Gemma's. This is the outfit that she wore. Right? We have 2 or 3 complete outfits that are less than that's it. But this is exactly what she wore: the little cape, the black wool dress, the shoes. Here we're missing the hat, but it's a black straw hat. Gemma was very small. She was about 5'2", very slender. She had, how do we say that? Châtaigne, how do we say that? Sort of brown, light brown, almost blondish hair, and blue eyes. Which is why she had to turn down a bunch of proposals for marriage, but that's another problem. Right. So this is one of the other photos, or a copy of one of the photos we have of her praying. It was taken at the time. It was a very famous pose, a lot of photos of people at that time. So this is the statue, that one of the few possessions she had. So this statue, which you can see if you come to Lucca, it's there in Casa Giannini. I've seen it 1,000 times. This statue was given to her by her mother before she passed away. This is the statue of Our Lady of Sorrows, as you can see with the sword, right? Piercing Mary's heart. This statue was, for a twofold reason, very dear to Gemma. Aside from the fact that it was a gift of her mother, also the hair of the statue is the hair of her brother Gino, the seminarian who died at 18 years of age from tuberculosis. So she was very, very dear to Gemma, this statue. And the statue is also, like everything in the house, to be honest with you, it is miraculous also. It has wept many times in history. And Gemma, when it would weep in front of Gemma, she would say, oh you wicked sinners, stop making your mother cry. This is Casa Giannini, so this is where you can visit to this day. You can go out there. And this is the side where you can see on the second floor. It's not one of these windows, it's on the other side, but on the interior court, that's where you can see the room where she died. You can go visit it very easily. This is the iron corset that she had to wear when she had the spinal abscess, and she had to be treated. For over a year she wore this to try to keep, at the end she was really bent over, almost 90 degrees. So this is a little holy card demonstrating the impression of the stigmata. As we said, the arrows of fire that came out from our Lord, although this is not quite correct because he was dressed as a priest during the apparition. And Our Lady, during the apparition, she covered Gemma with her mantle to help her to sustain her during the tremendous pain of the impression of the stigmata. This is the room where it happened. You can also visit, it's just there. Right? It's 2 minutes by foot. Right? So it took place right there, right? In that room. So this is an interesting little bit of saint history. So Gemma is one of the very, very few saints that we have a photo in ecstasy. And the reason for that is that it was I think it was Giuseppe Giannini, one of the 12 boys in the Giannini family, who was a little bit rambunctious, as young boys can be. And he decided, because she went into ecstasy somewhat often, he decided to take a photo of her in ecstasy. She was not happy with this. But thanks to this act of cheekiness, we have a photo of a saint in ecstasy. That is a colored version of the photo that we have. So when actually she was in ecstasy. They actually made a painting of the photo during her lifetime, because they were very touched by it. She got really mad, and she hid the painting, and they had to have her spiritual father command her by obedience to not hide the painting anymore. So she had to get it out before she could hit it. It's a very Gemma thing to do. This is the Giannini family. This is Matteo, which is the great patriarch, Matteo Giannini, and his family, his wife, and Eufemia is back here. And she's one of the older children. This is Cecilia. This is the Aunt Cecilia, who was the right-hand woman of the spiritual directors of Gemma. Gemma was not in the photo because this is before she arrived, but it's a very beautiful, very Catholic family. They still have descendants to this day that still live there. 12 children. You're about to have some great grandkids, right? And there's a lot we could say. It was a very, I would say, if you'll excuse the expression, he was a man's man. He was a pharmacist, a very devout man, a member of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre. He had been to the Holy Land. This is before planes in pilgrimage. A real believer. He took it seriously. An extremely kind and generous man. And this is Aunt Cecilia. A little bit before you can see her clear. This is again Casa Giannini from another angle. So this is where you would enter if you visit Lucca over here. And these are the rooms where the family lived. They lived almost in the whole palace, basically, at the time. The whole building. This is the study that, again, you've all visited. I've given visits at least 50 times in this house. So this is where Gemma would write her letters on help the children with their homework. She wrote her autobiography, which is one of the documents. So furthermore, I should add, a couple of people have asked me what are some documents you can read. The main documents that you can read, the primary sources, so to speak, have all been translated, and I think are all free on the internet. There's her autobiography, which is not complete, it only goes to 1901. You have her letters and the ecstasies, and I think all of them have been translated, so if you want to read those. As well as the biography of Padre Germano, you can find that easily on the internet. But she wrote the autobiography and these things here. That little chair there, I'm a fan of pointing that out. That was her ecstasy chair, right? So, when she would go into ecstasy, all right, she would sit in that chair. And that's where the photo was taken. And that's where you see, if you see attention here, that's where the original photo is. This was her room, where you can see, this is where Gemma slept. That's where she underwent the Passion, while she was with the Giannini family, the scourging, the dislocation of the shoulder, the bones broken, everything. She went right here. And we have many relics that left over from, do you imagine how many times the family would clean up the blood? She would go through that. Many handkerchiefs and towels and sheets. And we still have a bunch of them to this day. And she went through that all here. And this was actually Cecilia's bed. So she could keep an eye on her. So she was right next to her. That's the painting of the Sacred Heart that she would turn around when she wasn't happy with it. That's this. You have to come to Lucca, but this little. I'm not sure how we call it in English. Dresser, yeah. This little dresser is miraculous, but you have to come to Lucca. I'll tell you the story. That's her bed. And so that's a little explanation in Italian. This is a very wonderful object in the house where there's a story where this crucifix it's in the dining room of the family. And it's in like a kind of a dresser, kind of two doors that you can close, right? And they would close it during the meals by respect for it, but then otherwise they would keep it open. Gemma had to sit with her back to the crucifix, because otherwise she would go into ecstasy during the meals, which is not convenient, right? And so her place was right, kind of like this, with the cross behind her, right? And one time, her job amongst her domestic duties in Casa Giannini was to set the table, right? And so she would put the plates out and everything. And one day she was there, she was taken up with a desire to drink the blood of Christ. And so she went to this crucifix, which is about human size, a little smaller, maybe a little smaller. And she said, "I want to drink your blood, but she's too short. She's like this tall. Right? The crucifix is kind of up. So this crucifix became real, took life. It stuck. He detached his right hand. He picked her up, and he carried her, and she was able to drink his blood from the wound in the side. And this crucifix, it's still there. You can still see it. It's right there. This is Father Germano, our second spiritual director, if you remember, who wrote the autobiography, who's venerable. This is the room next to Gemma's room, where they put her when she started to get very sick in 1902 to give her a nicer bed. And this is where you see where my little laser pointer is, that's where Our Lady appeared. She was right there to give her the marriage ring, the mystical marriage was in this bed. I said Gemma's very concrete, right? It's all still there. Right? It's one of the beauties of having a saint that's so recent. Abby Raymond has seen all this. So. Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I have, but it's highly recommended. It's like very powerful.
Yeah. So this is a photo of her from the end of her life. So you can see she hasn't put on weight, but she's actually that's when she wasn't eating at the time. So she's just swollen from water. So she actually was the time when she was vomiting. She couldn't even take the Eucharist. That's at that time in her life. And this is a photo of the end of her life in a little room. This is not the end, but I think this is after she passed. So you see Matteo Giannini. You have sisters, what we call the Barbantini sisters, who is another saint, which is 10 minutes away from this house, who's another incorrupt nun who founded another community of sisters who take care of the dying. So there's a Luca, there's all these saints just hanging around. So, and this is the register that's from 1903. It marks where she died. This is from the day of her beatification. This is a better photo from her canonization in 1940. So you can see St. Peter's. At the time, they would put the portrait of the saint up high. And that's her. And this is the church, Casa Giannini. So if you remember the photos from Casa Giannini, it's right across the street. 10 feet, right? And that's Santa Maria della Rosa. It's Our Lady of the Rose. That's where we say Mass. By God's grace, and by grace of His Excellency, the Archbishop of Lucca. And that's the church today. And that's the inside. That is the icon of Our Lady of the Rose, which is from the 1300s. The church was consecrated in 1304. So, we're talking about old. That's old. So that image is miraculous. There were many ex votos. It was pontifically crowned by Pius IX, which is the 1870s, if I'm not mistaken. So we have the Great Grace. This was from the Immaculate Conception a few months ago. This photo we had Mass. A little statue, that's a little altar of Gemma. This is the confessional where she went to confession. Again, it's right there. You can see it. She would kneel down there, and where she would go to confession to Monsignor Volpi or Father Germano. This is where she would sit. Now, to give you an idea what that is, if you look at the church, it's over here on the right. Right? It's the farthest place possible from the tabernacle. And there's a concrete reason for that. Because Gemma is anything but intellectual, right? She doesn't overthink anything, right? So she's not like, I must take the last place to be humble, nice little... No, okay? Very practical. Gemma is a soul of fire. And she sat right there, so it's roped off. And this explains why. So, as she wrote in this letter to her spiritual father, she says, "Oh, Babbo mio, oh my father, I don't know what to think about something. Saturday I was in the church before the Blessed Sacrament exposed. I wanted to get closer as much as I could, but I really felt like leaving, and I would have left, because I felt myself burning all throughout my body, even into the head, even into the face. I don't know, Father, how it's possible that so many people can be so close to Jesus and not burst into flames. And for me, it seems that if I was there for 15 minutes, I would become a pile of ashes. This phenomenon was not psychological. It was verified by the doctors. She would physically get hot in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. And you could feel it through her clothes. And she, which I mentioned, St. Philip Neri, the day of her confirmation, St. Philip, she had the same phenomenon or similar, where her heart would beat so fast she broke her rib cage. So when she died, they did an autopsy and they found that her ribs had been expanded, and her heart was extremely enlarged. It was so bad, so to speak, that they should see it going through her shirt. And so the Giannini family would put their hand on her heart because they were afraid that it would come out of her chest during these excesses. St. Philip Neri had the same phenomenon. Right? He literally broke his own ribs by the ardent beating of his heart. And these are some of the relics you can see. These are all just pieces of linen that are stained by her blood, having cleaned up after having lived through the Passion. You can see the iron corset, different relics, little pieces, little objects like a watch, a teacup and things like that. These are all, you can go see them in Lucca, no problem. This is a little hat that she wear. These are some of the letters written by her hand. And other pieces of a nightgown. And if you can see the kind of the blood stains on this, you get an idea. Right? It was a great work of charity that the Giannini family undertook for taking care of Gemma. That's it. So, with that, I'll leave you with some desserts from Lucca that Marco has procured for us. And thank you very much again for your participation, for your help, and God bless you. God bless you.